Japan, land of the rising sun, a country whose rich history and culture is known around the world. There's many things that might pop into your head whenever you hear Japan. Perhaps it's samurai, ninja, geisha, cherry blossoms, Mount Fuji, sushi, ramen, sumo, baseball, anime. What the fuck? Or if you're anything like me, it's giant robots. You might be wondering what my favorite part of going to Japan was. Was it the food? The convenience stores? Buying hundreds and hundreds of dollars of Godzilla merchandise after meeting the big man himself? Watching the snow monkeys play in the hot springs of YAMANOUCHI? Unknowingly being one of the last tourists allowed to walk through Kyoto's geisha district? Or being one of the last lucky few to watch the 1/1 scale real-life Gundam walk the earth? Oh yeah, and also being part of a public execution. Well, we're going to talk about all that and much more. Welcome back. If you have already subscribed, and to all the newcomers, thank you for coming on in. I'm very excited for today's video because this is something very different from anything I've made before. I'm not one to really vlog or make any personal type videos, but this is a special occasion. I've been meaning to talk about my vacation to Japan for a while now, but this is one of those things you kind of need time to let sink in. Being it was my first time traveling overseas, I didn't want to be stuck the whole time looking through a camera lens, so honestly, I never really planned to make a video. But looking back through all the footage, I actually captured a lot more than I thought, and thinking back, it's honestly like a dream, like a big blur. And it's just really nice to relive a lot of those moments. It makes me so excited to go back. And look, I don't have any special origin story. I'm not that unique. Much like a lot of you, I always dreamed about going to Japan since I was a little kid. Growing up, I watched a whole lot of Japanese media. Obviously, most of that was anime, but I really loved Godzilla films, samurai films, watching crazy Japanese game shows, and of course I grew up playing Sony PlayStation, Nintendo, and of course falling in love with giant mecha robots. I'm not going to go super in-depth play-by-play, but here's an incredibly crude and rough drawing I actually did before my trip where I planned out all the different cities that we ended up going to. To be completely honest, it's more or less a customized version of the Abroad in Japan recommended trip. I had already done my research beforehand, but honestly, the train route was just really easy to follow. It was just a good template to base on, and it's really easy to kind of swap things in and out depending on what you're personally interested in. And to answer some common questions, do you need to know Japanese before going? Honestly, not really. It kind of depends on the city or the town that you're going to. Most of the places I went to were more or less tourist friendly, and even if they weren't, I mean, Google Translate is just so easy nowadays. Even though a lot of the signs have already been converted into English due to the Olympics. Again, it just really depends on where you're going. For me, I really wanted to travel to as many places as I could. I really didn't stay anywhere more than 2 or 3 days. But regardless, I still recommend trying to memorize at least 20 to 50 phrases. I mean, you don't have to learn full-on sentences, but just the basics. Arigatou gozaimasu, sumimasen, Out of all the phrases I learned, the one I ended up using the most was "osumi wa nan desu ka," which basically means "what do you recommend?" It's the best thing to say if you're at a restaurant or if you're looking for drinks. And honestly, I just kind of let the staff take the wheel and order a lot of things for me, and I was never disappointed. I mean, I like to explore, I like to experiment, and if you go to any restaurants and they have English and Japanese menus, it sounds crazy, but I do recommend actually getting the Japanese menu because the English menus usually have higher prices. Pretty screwed up, but hey, I can't blame them. If you clicked on this video, of course, the big draw is the Gundam and the Evangelion, but let me just run through some other cool shit I saw real quick.
So that was a fucking lie.
Well, surprise, surprise, I'm a big yapper as per usual. For those of you who are just here for giant robots, I have put timestamps for all 3 mecha that I visited, so you can go ahead and skip to those parts. On with the video. We begin our journey in Tokyo, where we stayed for the first 3 days and ended our last day on the trip.
The next station is Tokyo. The doors on the left side will open. Please change your for the Shinkansen, the Tokaido line, the Yokosuka line.
Our first hotel was right in Asakusa, just a little ways away from the iconic Shinsoji Temple. This is a super tourist-heavy location, but honestly, I didn't feel that overwhelmed. I know a lot of people say that it's too crowded and that you don't get the same magical feeling, but you gotta keep in mind, this is all brand new to me, so for me, it wasn't so bad. It also helped that we went on a weekday during a very cold season, so honestly, I thought it was beautiful and I enjoyed the hell out of it. But while in Tokyo, we also made our way to Shinjuku, Ginza, Akihabara, Harajuku, and Shibuya. And our last apartment we stayed at was right next to the iconic Tokyo Skytree. And of course, for all the action figure nerds and anime otaku, Akihabara is considered the holy land to which we all flock. And this is the part where I'm supposed to say how hard it delivered. And while it was pretty neat, I gotta say, I was somewhat disappointed to see just how many stores had the exact same merch. And from what I've heard, a lot of old mom and pop shops have closed down over the years. Not to mention the iconic Sega building isn't there anymore as well. But almost every store I went to kind of just had the same Crane game figures, you know, the ones that are just in square boxes and they're just as still statues. While they were significantly cheaper than what you would pay for them here in an American comic book shop or something like that, they're just not the kind of figures I was really looking for. That's not to say I didn't find anything there that I was on the hunt for. Because just like a good video game, you want to check every single door and every single corner if you want to find treasure. And the 2 stores that I recommend the most for figures and collectibles are actually 2 different chains that you can find in multiple cities. First store I recommend is called Surugaya. Once I discovered it existed, I found one in almost every city I went to, and it was a big highlight of my trip. It's a used video game, comics, and figure shop, so almost everything they sell there is secondhand. However, there's a lot of stuff that's in new condition as well. But being that I am the retro Robo Boy, most of the stuff that I'm looking for is like 20, 30 years old, so this store was heaven for me. I also own a Japanese PlayStation 2, so I picked up a few retro games as well, and these things are so cheap over there. I could not recommend buying video games over there enough because they are in almost brand new condition, and the American equivalent copies will be like, you know, $100, $200, while over there, these were like $10, $15, maybe $20 max. And the second used figure and bookshop I recommend is called Mandorik. This place was even cooler. The outside looks super insane. It's this really old steampunk looking sci-fi building. And then once you actually walk in, it goes down not 1, not 2, but 3 stories underground until you're led into this giant basement maze. So if you're claustrophobic, it might freak you out, but it's really cool because they have this giant mural on the ceiling leading down the stairs that has all these old-fashioned, you know, manga characters. And then once you actually get in there, it's literally just a maze of retro anime and manga shit, and it was the coolest place ever. It really felt like something out of the back rooms. I could not recommend it enough. And what's cool about that store is that not only do they have figures, but then they also have a lot of art books, and they have different sections, which is really old, really vintage. I mean, truly vintage collectibles, stuff from like the 1950s. It was crazy holding a lot of these things in my hand that I've only ever seen online, and seeing it in person, and, you know, smelling the pages of these art books. I mean, you know, I'm a sucker for vintage bookstores, record stores, things like that. So this just added this extra layer because these are things you would never find in America. I forgot to mention that I went to Japan with my roommate Drew, and he's a big wrestling fan. He had never been to a wrestling match before, and it just so happened that when we were going, there was this big epic wrestling match in the Tokyo Dome. And so the night that we went to that wrestling match, it was the heaviest snowfall I've ever experienced. I mean, I'm sure some of you already know, but I live in Texas. It's hot. It's hot as hell here. You know, it might snow once a year and it doesn't stick to the ground. This was like the thickest, heaviest snow. I mean, I had an umbrella out and I could just hear it raining down on top of my umbrella. It was loud, crunchy, beautiful snow. And I think it was like a record. I think it hadn't snowed in Tokyo for quite a while. And it was slippery, but they managed to clean it up real quick. By the next morning, the streets were completely swept, and there were just snowmen everywhere, and it was like super magical, and like the neon lights were like shining on the snow, making it all glow. It was just so beautiful, and I'm just really glad we went in February because even though it's super cold, that time of year isn't nearly as tourist heavy. There were a fair amount of tourists, but for the most part, I was one of the only foreigners standing around, and it was pretty funny. It was kind of awkward. There were quite a few moments where I definitely felt the stare, but it never felt aggressively prejudiced. It was just a general like, man, what the hell are you doing here? And it was pretty funny. I got a kick out of it. I can't imagine it being even more crowded than it already was, especially when we started to make our way towards Osaka, but I'm not going to get ahead of myself here. The Ginza district definitely felt the most fancy or rich, and it was there that we visited the world's largest Uniqlo. And if you don't know what Uniqlo is, it's a Japanese clothing store just known for having really cheap, really nice essentials, and they actually just recently opened one up right next to me here in Texas, which everyone was really excited about. I was lucky enough to go to the one in New York City as well as the one in Ginza, and I mean, these places are huge. I mean, they are multiple floors, and you can easily just get lost going through each level. And we got really lucky too, because while we were there, they were actually doing the Metal Gear Solid collaboration. My roommate Drew, who came with me, is obsessed with Metal Gear, so he bought one of each shirt because they are way cheaper over there, and honestly, they're pretty sick shirts. We also went to a random shopping mall just right down the street, and it was super stuffy and super hot, and we had all these big heavy jackets on, and it was right then at that moment that we found out they had rooftop access. So we went ahead and went up to the roof, and it was this weird, like ethereal, magical experience because there was no one else there, but they had this little private garden with this tree there just right on the roof, and it was just a really nice spot to catch some air. As far as other stores go, we actually visited 3 Pokemon centers. Man, it was so cool because one of them was actually next to a Shonen Jump and a Capcom store. I believe that was in Tokyo. That was in Shinjuku. And that one, they actually had a 1/1 scale Mewtwo sitting in the giant chamber. That was super cool. What's nice is that each city's Pokemon Center also had a slightly different theme. Like one had more of a tropical Hawaiian theme, and they also had different statues and like things in the actual store, and the actual merch itself was specific to those stores, so that kind of made it a little bit more worth seeking them out. Harajuku has long been considered the fashion hub and kind of culture hub of Tokyo. However, from what I've heard over the years, it's been kind of watered down, and honestly, when I went, it was neat, but it was probably one of my least favorite places I visited in Tokyo. It was a little overrated. I don't know. It just seems like every other store felt like a knick-knack store. However, I did get this super badass Evangelion tee, and the old gentleman who sold it to me actually gave me this big discount on it, and he was super friendly, and it was just super nice. Speaking of tourist attractions, I also saw this really funny corn dog place called Long, Longer, Longest. And while I was on the street, I got this super gimmicky rainbow cheese corn dog, and man, whatever you do, do not order that shit because it was gross. Whenever I hear Tokyo, the first image that comes to my mind is Shinjuku. While technically there's advertisements and bright lights all over the city, Shinjuku just has that extra sparkle that really just screams Tokyo to me. Even though most people would be pretty cynical about a place that's just plastered with advertisements, it does have that urban coral reef like rainbow beauty to it. And to me, I was just in awe looking around the whole time. And most importantly, that's where the big G-Man himself is. I was so excited to see Godzilla. It was driving me insane, and it kind of took us a little while to actually find him. But finally, after 20 minutes of running around, I look up from the base of the IMAX theater, home of the Godzilla Hotel, and I see him, Gojira himself, in the flesh. And my only regret is that we weren't able to actually go up and see the head up close. Apparently you actually have to rent a room in the Godzilla Hotel if you want to do that, and yeah, I'm not paying all that shit, bro. But shit, this is no time for tears. We took our photos and we went right down the street to the Godzilla Tokyo store. Talk about a kid in a candy shop. Holy shit, they had everything you could possibly want. And the staff were just chuckling the whole time watching my excitement. I literally was running out of room in my arms holding all the figures, and that's when they came over and gave me a basket. They were super helpful and super nice, and they were sure to let me know that I could get everything tax-free. That's right, if you're a tourist and you're buying souvenirs, you get tax-free merch. This is the closest thing to heaven on earth. This might be my most controversial statement here, but I found Shibuya Crossing somewhat underwhelming. It really, I guess it depends on the lenses that people take photos and videos with, but on camera, it seems so much bigger than it is, but it's really less so the size that's impressive and more just the sheer amount of people. It's the busiest crossing, and I mean, it lives up to that name. But the actual just general size really isn't all that special. It was cool to walk through, but honestly, if you skip it, it's not really a big deal. Of course, being the Americans we are, we had to go to Japanese McDonald's and Japanese Taco Bell, something I did not even know existed. I actually didn't want to go, but Drew insisted, since Drew is a big Taco Bell head. I mean, so am I, I'm not gonna lie. But I think the weirdest thing is they actually offer beers with your meal, and it's just so weird buying beer in a Taco Bell. Well, there's no way in hell we would do that back here. And speaking of beer, I almost forgot to mention that we actually visited Golden Gai in Shinjuku. If you're not familiar with Golden Gai, it's a very famous district within Shinjuku that is known for its bars. A lot of the bars in Japan are known for being super tiny, super packed, and usually only offering 4 to 5 seats, which to some people might sound like a nightmare, but it makes for a very intimate environment where you actually get to sit right next to and chit chat with locals. It's a place where both tourists and salarymen go alike. And skipping a little further ahead, I just want to cover my last night in Tokyo just because I want to wrap up Tokyo all in one segment, and I have to talk about the Tokyo Skytree. As I mentioned earlier in the video, we got an apartment directly next to the Skytree. Like, we could literally see it out our window glowing at night. It was super cool, and the apartment itself that we stayed in was a really unique, really skinny building with really big windows, and it probably was the best view that we got. When we eventually made our way to the Tokyo Skytree, we were surprised to find not only that they had a Pokemon store, but they actually had a Gundam merch store. That's right, a store dedicated just to Gundam merch called Strict G. They had a lot of bomber jackets and leather jackets, you know, figurines, but it was mostly clothes. I had actually never heard of this store, but it was pretty neat. And now it's time to leave Tokyo and make our way into the mountains. There's quite a few of you watching who probably know me pretty well, and what you know about me is that I love Gundam, I love Godzilla, I love cats, and I love monkeys. Oh my god, the Snow Monkey Park in Yamanouchi is pure heaven. It's a pain in the ass to get there, but once you're there, it is so precious. It's a long trek through this mountain path that honestly is quite sketchy. It is incredibly slippery, and if you fall, you're gonna hit a bunch of trees and it's gonna be impossible to get out of that ditch. But it was so cool to walk across that mountainside and just watch that snow fall down from the trees. And when you finally turn around the corner and you start to hear rushing water, you see the Snow Monkey Park and the hot springs. You can see the steam rising up. It looks like some shit straight out of Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke. I mean, it's so beautiful. And the closer and closer you get to the hot springs, the more and more you start to hear all those chirps and chitters from all the baby monkeys. And then out of nowhere, you just look down, and there they are. They're running around your feet. They're riding up and down the hills. They're making little snowballs. They're playing in the water. It's just so cute to see them running around. Technically, you can actually spend the night here, but not only do you have to do it really far in advance, but once you're out there, you're kind of just stuck out in the middle of nowhere. And not that I need electronics and all that other bullshit, but there's really not a whole lot to do, and I imagine it's pretty packed. I mean, I've seen it online. It looks very pretty and, you know, old-fashioned. And the main appeal is that you can actually get into the hot hot spring and the monkeys will actually get in there with you, even though you're not supposed to touch them. That would have been a really cool experience, but honestly, it wasn't worth the money and just the hassle of staying. I think just visiting the park itself is great enough. I got a lot of good footage, and I think I'm just gonna let it play and speak for itself. Alright, enough monkey business, on to the next place. Kanazawa is a place that's known mostly for its green tea and matcha, so most of the pictures I got there are of just all the different green tea products that I got, as well as golden ice cream. The lady who did it for me was so nice. She literally told me, take out your phone, take out your phone. And it was really sweet and really cool. It was there that we also went to this giant fish market, which was super cool, and it looked super spooky at night. I'm glad that we actually ended up going back through there, because it felt like we were in a ghost town or something, and it just was the neatest experience. Kanazawa is also known for having these samurai houses, which is this little couple of blocks where they preserved these literal samurai houses, and it's pretty trippy walking through there, because suddenly you go from walking next to pizzerias to walking next to literal samurai houses. And of course, you can't forget their most important landmark, the Moron Cafe. Don't ask, because I don't know. We also visited this park that had these old castles, and it just, I don't know, it kind of felt like we were in the Zelda overworld or something. And of course, I had to go and embarrass myself by walking into this shinobi shop where they actually have this whole setup where you can throw ninja stars, and of course, I had my ass handed to me.
じゃあ簡単にご説明を。手裏剣の尖っているところ、先っちょ軽く持ってください。で、あとは普通にスローイン。あ、すごいから。はい。ありがとう。Alright, so here we go.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Oh my god!
for my shitty ass throwing star technique. I only got 2 out of 5 stars, but I got a little candy bag and 5% off anything in the store.
We made a very quick stop to this place that was straight out of a Studio Ghibli movie called Shirakawa. Shirakawa is usually somewhere you would want to visit during springtime. It's usually just full of beautiful green grass and these old style houses. But when we went, of course, it was covered in snow, but it was still really cool. And they have this shop, which apparently has won like the best pudding in the country, like multiple times in a row. And yeah, that shit was good. I think out of all the places I visited, my favorite might actually be the Showa era museum in Takayama. It's probably the single coolest museum I've been to in my entire life. Yes, I know I'm incredibly biased because I'm into old-fashioned Japanese culture, but there's just nothing cooler than seeing vintage room replicas and old vehicles and advertisements and toys and magazines and record machines and telephones, just all this old, cool stuff laid out as Showa-era music plays eerily in the background. It felt like I was walking through a 1960s commercial, or I was on the set of a classic movie. And of course, there's authentic, vintage Gundam merch. Takayama is also known for its beef, and man, let me tell you, it's hard to beat. I will not lie. It's expensive as shit, but it's totally worth it. We eventually made our way to Yokohama, and of course, that's where the 1/1 scale walking Gundam was located. But it's also home to Japan's largest Chinese population, and of course, their giant Chinatown. And we didn't just go to Chinatown, we went to Chinatown on Chinese New Year. Man, was that an experience. This place was more densely packed than a Costco on a Saturday. If I close my eyes, I can still hear the dragons going up and down the street and smell the food. The food was so good. There was all kinds of buns and candy and just, I mean, I'm gonna let the pictures speak for themselves, but if you can somehow work that out, I could not recommend it enough. I know for some people this is kind of lame, but I think half the fun of traveling really is the hotels and the apartments that you rent. Even though they were super tiny, they all had some kind of charm to them. And I could just not recommend enough staying in as many different places as you can. I know it's a little pricey, and you may be more tempted to try and just find 1 or 2 places and just move back and forth, but I don't know, there's just something so exciting about, each time you arrive to a town, making your way to the apartment or to the hotel or wherever, seeing all the different weird features, and it was a trip. Not to mention watching Japanese TV. Do I know Japanese? No, but it was pretty neat seeing anime just playing on regular daytime TV. Not to mention the goofy-ass educational morning shows.
How about you? I'm fine. I'm great. I'm sleepy. Really?
Oh my god.
Are you ready? No, not yet. Are you ready? Yes, I'm ready. Sorry. That's okay. Don't worry. I'm okay. Excuse me. Wait a minute. All right, no problem. Go ahead.
they've had this guy dancing on the screen. Oh my god. They have this guy just strutting his shit for like almost 10 minutes. No, seriously, this guy's just going and going and going. I have no idea what's going on here. So this program, this guy is just getting punched in the nuts over and over and getting a rake smacked over his head. Now he's sitting on a like, oh my. He's painting while there's like a spike going in his head. So I wasn't kidding. Oh, he just stopped. Of course, because they know I'm watching. This guy got a rock and was smacking himself in the dick over and over. What is this? I told you I wasn't lying. They keep hitting themselves in the dick. Like, really hard. Now there's an unlockable character. Mystery character. Yo, what the f***? What is this shit? Y'all, they're doing a reenactment of Titanic dubbed in Japanese. And they're just showing people reacting and crying to it. It is the funniest shit I have ever seen. Dude, look at this. Oh my god. Dude, they got the Titanic theme and everything. Dude, that is not Leonardo DiCaprio, and that is not Kate Winslet. Who are these people? While flipping channels, I found this samurai show, like this old-ass samurai show, and Drew, what'd you say?
It's the Japanese version of MASH.
The number one landmark most people associate with Japan is Mount Fuji, but it's one of those things that's kind of tricky to see because it's usually blocked by terrible cloud coverage. I got so unbelievably lucky when I was riding the Shinkansen. It just so happened to be right out the window, and I almost missed it because I was sitting on the other side of the train until one of the locals next to me tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, it's Mount Fuji. It's never this clear. I've been riding this train every day for work, and I'm telling you right now, this is the clearest I've ever seen it. You need to take a picture right now. And I was like, shit, say no more, lady. I got up, ran to the window, and I got this video, and oh my god, it is even more beautiful in person. And the fact that there's just one picturesque cloud just hovering right above it, casting this little shadow, just showing you how big this mountain is. I mean, it doesn't look real. It's like a screensaver. It's just so beautiful. We eventually made our way to Kyoto, which is the big cultural hub that everyone knows. And I gotta say, that geisha district, not gonna say it's overrated, but I didn't even realize where I was walking until afterwards, and I saw the news that it's no longer available for tourists. I guess I got really lucky and unlucky at the same time. I didn't realize how good I had it, but it was still pretty cool. We got to visit some of the shrines as well as the Pokemon Center. We got some beef, of course, but the biggest boss battle of this entire trip was walking up all the torii gates. Man, oh my god, I cannot tell you how truly grueling that process was. Make sure you're carrying as light a weight as possible, wearing the most comfortable shoes you can. I don't think anyone could put it more poetically than my roommate Drew. Here is a montage of clips showing my morale slowly slipping as I start to go insane, with my only light being my roommate Drew helping us get through the way. Alright, so we're entering the torii gates, and Drew says he wants to do all 1,000 of them or whatever, which takes like an hour. But we're gonna try and do it and fight the final boss. Here we go. Drew, how do you feel going through the gates? Feel anything? Nope. So we're getting closer to the top of the torii gates. We have the view of Kyoto. You feel anything yet, Drew?
A little tired.
How you feeling now, Drew? That you had some soybean ice cream.
Good.
That was good.
We are now almost to the summit of the mountain.
Beware, boars and monkeys.
Matcha ice cream sandwiches, but we can't stop now. We gotta defeat the final boss. What is the final boss, Drew? Do you know?
Ourselves.
Ourselves, jeez.
Ourselves.
Holy shit. Drew, we finally finished. We finally finished the 10,000 step climb. How do you feel? That's good.
After that, we went to a bamboo forest, which is just as pretty as you'd think. Now leaving Kyoto behind, we're heading for what might be my favorite city in all of Japan, Osaka. Osaka is one of those places that really has its own hip kind of subculture, and in many ways is what I would consider the Japanese equivalent of somewhere like Seattle, Portland, or Austin. When compared to other cities in Japan, it just seems to be that everyone's a little bit more laid back and just a little less conformist, giving the city a very unique vibe. There's a lot of cool clubs and bars, and more importantly, really good food. And one of the places to indulge in said cuisine would be Shinsekai, a neighborhood full of shopping and good eats that's known as New World. It's known for its very distinct retro futuristic style, as well as an iconic centerpiece, the Sutenkaku Tower. It's there that we got a variety of different fried foods and really just took in the atmosphere looking around at all the different signage. We've seen a lot of signs and ads already, however, they do it on a whole nother level. Instead of relying on bright, flashy neon lights, you get much more practical art displays that really pop and really make you feel like you just entered a whole nother world. Though if it is glowing neon lights you're looking for, Osaka is an excellent place to get them, because the Glico Running Man just might be the most recognizable neon sign in all of Japan, and he's the unofficial mascot of the Dotonbori Canal. And when I visited the canal, I was in awe, and I'm sure you can see why. And also might have been the busiest spot I had ever been to. Yes, even more busy than Chinatown. But hey, we weren't here alone. We were joined by none other than Spider-Man himself. Look at him go.
Hello, Spider-Man.
And when it comes to the fried foods, Osaka is probably most known for their takoyaki. Takoyaki being the fried octopus. Fair warning, make sure you tear a hole in them before you actually bite down, because that shit is hot! And taking a trip back to ancient times, we went to Osaka Castle, which might have been the most visually epic location we went to. It's really crazy to think just how much history has gone through this place, and to think that samurai used to actually patrol the border of this castle is just something else. One of the biggest surprises of the Osaka visit was actually a museum located just right outside the castle, and not just any museum, but an action figure museum. I had no idea that this was here, and to say this would be something on my bucket list is an understatement. You take a trip down to the basement floor of this museum, and then before you know it, you're greeted by this giant Evangelion statue. You're also given a little coin that you put through a capsule machine where you get a little prize figure, which is just such a cool idea. There was also yet another life-size statue of Rei Ayanami. But it was quite nostalgic because there was a good number of figures that they had on display that were ones I have actually owned in the past, and even more that I've always wanted. But to see these toys and figurines displayed with such reverence is just, I don't know, it's such a weird concept to me because it's not something you would really ever see done here in the States. But while it might just be plastic to some, it's art to me, and I enjoyed every little diorama and every display that they had there. and that gift shop at the end. Ooh, that was tempting, but luckily I did not spend a penny. But that's mostly because I didn't really have any more room in my suitcase. But a great place to get little knickknacks and souvenirs for friends and family is the famous Don Quixote. Don Quixote is a store that just has everything you could possibly want, from socks to kitchenware, and it's a bit like a convenience store. However, it's a lot more extra. You take escalators up multiple floors, and each floor is kind of like its own department. And if you're looking to get crazy Kit Kat flavors, this is probably the best place to do it. But enough of my yapping. I know that the main reason most of y'all clicked on this video was for the real life mecha. So let's talk about it. Are they as glorious and beautiful as I thought they would be? The answer is that they are even more so. Seeing the life-size Gundam kneel down before me is a moment I will carry with me to my grave as my brain starts to die and I'm seeing all the last moments flash before my eyes. That is one that is definitely going to be on that playlist of memories. The hype is insane because as you walk up to the docking bay, you can actually see it in its cage behind the building. And it really builds up this dramatic whimsy and excitement as you get up to the ticket gate. The tickets were actually surprisingly cheap. I think it was around $18 US. I forgot exactly how much, but yeah, it wasn't super expensive. And there's actually two options. There's a ground floor option, and then there's the high-rise level. And most people would probably think, oh, you want to get those high-rise seats because they always sell out. But to be honest, I am so glad that I went with the ground floor, because part of the magic of seeing this machine is being there at ground level, looking up at that 60-foot tall robot. It just is so intimidating, and it really puts into perspective just how crazy and insane these machines are. Because in the original 1970s anime, of course, you know, they're these giant monstrous machines of war. They're dangerous, they got their weapons, etc. But because of the animation and art style, sometimes it's really kind of hard to get a sense of scale. But to actually stand there and watch this thing move, you can't help but imagine just how insane it really would be to be in that war zone with these things running over your head, blasting giant artillery shells. I mean, it just ignites that inner child. And it sucks because we don't have anything even remotely as cool. Many would consider Gundam the Star Wars of Japan because of its cultural significance. And of course, at Disney World, we have the 1/1 scale Millennium Falcon, which I actually got to see. But it's different because the Millennium Falcon isn't a 60-foot tall robot with legs. I mean, talk about real mecha. This is not an anime. Just imagine this, but 60 feet tall and walking. For a glorified theme park attraction, it really is an engineering feat that they actually got this thing up there. It wasn't just the sight, but it was also the sound. You got to hear the Gundam activate. You got to hear the characters chattering over the radio. They had all the classic sound effects in sync with it as it got up and got down, and it just really felt like the anime had come to life. What also enhanced the nostalgia was the fact that they were blaring the original soundtrack, and especially the ending theme to the third Gundam trilogy movie. And when they played that song, I could not help it. I just started crying. I started crying. It just was such a cathartic moment for me. And knowing that I was going to be one of the last people who got to see it walk. They tore it down in March. I got to see it in February. And they were, funny enough, they actually were supposed to tear down the statue a year prior, but because of COVID, they extended the stay for tourists. And I am so lucky that I got to see it. I never thought I would. I always thought it was gonna be too expensive, too far away, you know, what have you. And there I was standing there, and I just shed a tear. But not like anyone could see, because I was wearing my Char mask. Yes, I know, super dorky, super nerdy. Way to draw attention to myself, but I just had to. I had to don the mask as I looked up at it, and it was a really bright day too, so it kind of helps because it just worked as sunglasses. I almost actually wore full cosplay, and on the website it actually says you're allowed to wear cosplay, but I could not stand the shame of walking around in public wearing a bright red military uniform. I already was drawing eyes towards me anyways. I could not have that kind of public scrutiny on me. If it was a convention, it would be different, but I would be the only asshole walking around, you know, dressed like a complete dork. So I just, you know, I wore the mask. I could fit it into my suitcase easily. But even with just the mask, I was very happy to see a lot of fans pointing me out, you know, both old and young. It was little kids as well as old men. They were like, Shaw, you know, and it was just such like a fun bonding moment. Even though there was a language barrier there, I still just kept hearing Shar, Shar, Shar echoing all around me, and people smiling and, you know, taking pictures, and just, it was just such a cool, dorky moment. It's like just peak Gundam fan moment. And of course, they had a gift shop there where they sold a bunch of different models of the RX-782 as well as some other merchandise. To my surprise, they were really pushing Gundam Seed. Not just here, but honestly everywhere I went. And eventually I found out it's because the new movie was about to come out. But yeah, literally every toy store I went to, every, you know, shopping mall I went to, you know, all the different exhibits, there was Gundam Seed advertisements, and they had statues of the Freedom Gundam. And it was just kind of trippy because I'm used to seeing advertisements, you know, for the Avengers or for, you know, I don't know, in the new Pixar movie or whatever. So to see, you know, Gundam Seed plastered over everything, it was pretty neat. I got a kick out of it. And as I left the building, I turned around one last time to say goodbye to the Gundam forever. And even though they took it apart, they actually reassembled it in a new pose outside of a different building in a completely different location in Osaka. It was too expensive to keep it in the Yokohama port. I mean, that's an area that was, you know, very important for business anyways. It's just a shame that when they reassembled it, it wasn't in its original walking form. But it's kind of appropriate because in the original series, the machine is destroyed at the end, and I really felt like I was Amuro leaving the Gundam behind in a Baoku. It's pretty amazing to look at a giant robot, but you know what's even cooler? Piloting one. That's right, it's time to get in the robot. I am very ashamed to say that this was not on my itinerary because I did not realize that this still existed. While we were exiting the train in Kyoto, my roommate Drew pointed out a giant poster on the wall. It was an advertisement for the Toei Kyoto Museum, and it featured the life-size EVA Unit 1. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, holy shit! I forgot this existed. How did I miss that? I had seen photos of this online, but I always thought it was just some temporary build, and I just didn't hear a whole lot about it outside of the photos. So as soon as I saw that advertisement, my entire trajectory changed. As we made our way to the museum, we actually didn't find the entrance at first. We went down this weird alleyway, and it was completely inconspicuous, but we just looked over this wooden bridge, and there it was, the EVA Unit 1's head poking up above a bridge. It was a bit of a panic because it was actually our last day in Kyoto, and we had to rush because there was only 30 minutes until the whole place shut down. There was this really cool mock samurai town based on this old 1970s TV show. And while I was there, I actually had time to stop at one of the tea shops and get this novelty cup of the EVA Unit 1 tearing out of the AT field. I mean, that shit is just so cool. Yeah, they don't got this shit at Six Flags, to tell you what. They had this giant Kamen Rider statue, which was cool. They had a bunch of other cardboard cutouts of different characters from different shows. But of course, they had the entire Evangelion gang there, which was awesome, as well as what looked like these paper mache art pieces of different Evangelion units and angels. And even though it isn't the entire body of the EVA, this thing is intimidatingly large. Yes, I know the Gundam is technically bigger, but it being on the ground and you being able to go up and touch it just was just crazy. I mean, it really just puts into scale how huge this thing is. As I stood in its palm, I couldn't help but think how insane it would be to be carried around by this thing, let alone getting crushed in its hand. And of course, they had the Ava music playing over the loudspeaker, which just like ignited that nostalgia, really made you feel like you were in the anime. They had it sitting in the liquid pool of LCL, which was cool. Don't drink it. It does not taste good. As you go up to the hangar bay, you actually see the cardboard cutouts of each character, and here's the real reason why I bought a ticket to Japan, to take a photo with my real life waifu, Misato Katsuragi.
So gorgeous.
Yeah, right.
And yes, I have a Misato Polaroid photo tattooed on my leg. When you finally get to the top, that's when you get to the entry plug that's just sticking out the back. You get down in that seat, you put your hand on those handles, and it is the coolest thing ever. The only thing that would make it cooler is if you were actually 80 feet up in the air. As we were leaving, there were a group of actors or like theme park employees who were dressed as samurai and ninja waiting by the door. They saw me looking their way, and then they beckoned me over to take a photo, and of course, I had to do it. It was yet another dream come true, but this dream quickly turned into a nightmare. My roommate Drew betrayed me, and I became a hostage staged for execution. And as I stood there next to them, I had to brainstorm what kind of pose I wanted to do. And of course, my goofy ass wanted to be decapitated. So I got down on my knees, and that's when the samurai looked down at me and said, "You want to kill?" I was like, yeah, man, cut. And that's when they lined up the cut. But after Drew took the first photo, that's when one of the other employees came over and went, no, you too. And then the samurai pulls out his blade, hands it to Drew, and he joins them. And it was the greatest moment of betrayal I've ever felt in my entire life. And I will get you back one day. Easily my favorite photo I took there. But this is when the deep sadness started to sink in, because we're finally on our last day of the trip. We have just enough time to do one more thing. And of course, we had to knock out the Unicorn Gundam. I technically could have gone to see the new Gundam from Char's Counterattack, but I ended up choosing the Unicorn Gundam just because I really wanted to also see the Fuji TV building. It was definitely worth it. And even though the classic RX-782 Gundam was still more impressive because it was a walking machine, even though technically it's on rails, there's something about the extra height the Unicorn Gundam has, and also too, you can walk up way closer to it and it's flat on the ground. It's not elevated on a platform, so you can get up closer to it, and it's also just a little bit taller, so it felt a little bit more impressive. And of course, photos and videos don't do it justice. When you're sitting there looking up at it and it's literally blocking the sun, it is truly a titan of terror. And unlike the other Gundam, this one actually does have a transforming face where it could switch into the unicorn mode. Unfortunately, we weren't able to actually go into the Diver City shops, but for a last-minute stop before the airport, I say this was a major success. Japan is one of those bucket list places that I always knew I was going to get to eventually, but you know, the older I got, the more and more it felt like, oh, it's never gonna happen. And then one day, finally, I just decided, let's do it. And you know, I'm very fortunate that I went with a good friend who, you know, didn't get easily stressed out and was able to work with me. So thank you, Drew, for coming with me. I'm glad I had you there, and it just, you know, it's a trip I'll never forget, and it just left me wanting more, even though I visited so many places and I was there for a good 2 weeks. I mean, I could have easily stayed there for 2 months if I was privileged enough. You know, if I just count food and, you know, housing and all that good stuff, it was around $3,000, so, which in my opinion isn't so bad. I guess it really just depends on your budget, of course, but you know, I definitely am going to go back soon. I mean, there's a lot of places I want to visit, but you know, just because, you know, I already had exposure and interest ever since I was a really little kid. I mean, to me, it was just the ultimate dream. Of course, there were some things that surprised me. in good ways and bad ways. You know, like anywhere, it has its issues, but it's just such a just safe and clean and great place to visit. Of course, it's different to visit somewhere than it is to live somewhere, but I think, you know, if someone asked me just straight up, is it worth the hype? Immediately, yes, it is worth the hype. The food is incredibly cheap. All the people there I met were super, super nice. I actually have a pen pal who I met up with there, and she was super cool, and we played pool and darts, you know, had good drinks. It's an experience I am so thankful I got to have. I could not recommend it enough. But for those of you watching, please let me know, have you been to Japan? Do you plan on going to Japan? If you've been, you know, what were your favorite things about it? What are some spots you think people should visit? And what are some spots you recommend for me for my second trip? Hey Drew, come here real quick. So what'd you think about Japan?
It was a good experience.
What are you doing right now?
Eating a banana.
How's the banana taste?
Like a banana.
Thank you. But I'm getting pretty tired, and I think I've said everything that I need to say. So until next time, my friends. Matane.